And she said, what's that? And I said, oh, I've written this novel and I'm, just getting it published here. And she said, well, what's it about? And I said, no, it's start telling me about 12 and 2012. So it sounds really interesting. That's the kind of thing I like to do. We're Canada's largest independent fiction publisher. I said, oh, okay. He said, well, sure, you can have a copy. Let me know what you think. Well, so eventually my foreign rights manager comes to do our business, and she leaves at 3 o'clock, gets on the plane. By 11 o'clock that night, she calls me up and says, this is the reason I became a publisher. It's going to be huge. It's bigger than Self-Esteem Prophecy. I love this book. I've got it. So without seeking it, I got both Canadian and American publishers. And that's kind of the destiny of this book. I didn't seek to write it. I didn't seek to get it published. It just, the universe wants it published. And it wanted it published, and it wanted it specifically authored and promoted by me, because I happen to have the background to know sort of how to do all this. Because there's a lot in this novel. I mean, there's different levels you can read it. You can just read it as a fun story, and it is a fun story. I have been accused by some of the more establishment reviewers, well, it's a little contrived, and I'm like, well, it's all true, so I don't know. Sorry that the universe is contriving on you. But other than that, a lot of people have liked the novel a lot, and it has the ability to reach people who normally wouldn't, come to this bookstore or necessarily be part of sort of a transformational movement. Because the book really is about transformation. And what's interesting about transformation is to transform, you really just need to go back. It's sort of like, if you could capture the awareness that you have when you're first born, but integrate it with sort of how to survive on this planet with other human beings, that's really what transformation is about. Because if, you have any kind of belief in any kind of, not necessarily reincarnation, but any kind of circulation, I would call it, in terms of intelligence and of your being, it's like you came from somewhere. And wherever you came from, there was a level of awareness that was greater. And this is why, the near-death experience is so important. Because when you have a near-death experience, and this has now been confirmed by over 1 million people, you really understand that what you see on the surface here is really just on the surface. There's a whole other level of your being. And we need to integrate that level of being and that level of awareness with our normal everyday life. And that's kind of what the hidden message of the 12 is. And it's one of the reasons why I think it happens to be a very important book, because for the people that are already sort of into that kind of thinking, they can read at a much deeper level, and there's actually in the novel a scenario that can play out in reality. I'm actually at work with Jose Arguelles and Barbara Marx Hubbard and some other people who really have quite distinguished track record in, I guess, what you would call the field of consciousness and conscious evolution. And there's actually an event that we're going to try to put together that we may start even as early as this August, of getting a minimum of 1 million groups of 12 people together at different spots throughout the world. We can talk about that later in the questions. But so you have that level, but then more importantly, because we live in a time where every single human being is vital and important, but we all need critical numbers to make a real difference. And so, that's why I'm very focused on, not just selling, 100,000 or 500,000 books, but really selling millions of books, and really getting a movie that, hopefully will be at the level of the Titanic or something, that reaches hundreds of millions of people. Because it's not necessary that people consciously sort of want to sort of buy into the fact that transformation is possible, but just that they resonate not in opposition. So it's really important, particularly right now, that we reach as many people as we can, and not just the, quote, believers, not just the people that sort of have identified somehow that, there's a problem on the planet and we need to work together. The people that sort of are completely oblivious are actually more important right now. But they're both important. And unlike, because there's a lot of great books. I mean, they're all over the store. I mean, Eckhart's books, there's a ton of great books that have been written that sort of explicate, sort of in a more specific way, some of these ideas about transformation. But to my knowledge, there's actually no novel that does this, and no book that can, because you can give this book, to an ex-Marine, you can give it to somebody who thinks, hey, if I can't touch it, measure it, and feel it, it doesn't exist, and they'll still enjoy this book. And it may get them thinking in a slightly different way. So that's sort of the reason, for me, the book is very important. it really is, like some people talk about how, oh, I was so inspired, it was almost as if I channeled the book. Well, I won't, you know, buy into that at all. I wrote every word, and I was very conscious every minute of every word I wrote, and I thought the whole thing out very carefully. But what was channeled was my actual life. The incidents that make up this book all happened, and all happened in a sequence that, as far as I can tell, was very much destiny, and very much so that this book and this film could emerge at this specific time. I do think that 2012 is a very important date. I don't buy into any of this stuff that's happening, like this film that's coming out, that's, you know, the end of the world and all this disaster, and, you know, there's a lot of other people that buy into, you know, the Nostradamus people, and, you know, you have the Left Behind people, and, you know, there's all these different groups. There's no question that we are changing and that a cycle is ending, but just because a cycle is ending doesn't mean that a new cycle isn't beginning. And I see it as very optimistic, very positive, but I also think that it's really up to each human being to determine that this positive potential happens. I don't think that it happens without human beings taking responsibility and stepping up to the plate. It's, you know, from the point of view of, you know, the higher intelligence that guides all creation, we're really children. I mean, we've come a long way. We've created some great toys, and we've created some great technology. I mean, the internet, the fact that we can really have hundreds of, well, really billions of people now communicating. I don't know what the numbers are, but it must be, I think, 2 or 3 billion people that are connected via the internet. You know, we really, that's an amazing achievement. And we've done other things that are amazing achievements. And now it's sort of time to consolidate and also to redirect sort of what are our goals going to be, and actually step up and, and leave adolescence and sort of become mature spiritual human beings who actually care for the planet and each other in a more coherent, practical way. And it doesn't have to be that you give anything up. I mean, you know, you have to give up your excesses, I think. We all have excesses. But it really can be more joyful, because the greatest joy that people get in life comes from their own creativity and their own sharing of their own joy. And, you know, that can be greater. I mean, I think it will be greater. I mean, so much of what we've accepted, and some of this is mentioned in the book, the periods that Max has of disillusionment when he's at Harvard, and he writes this essay on the creation of non-human beings that really only exist to consume. There's too much truth to that in our present world. So, you know, I'm full of great hope that great things can happen. And as Catherine mentioned, I do see this book as a vehicle into something. I have some sort of, I guess people would call radical business ideas of how to create, the working title right now is Courageous Communications. And to create a media company that really, of course, you know, anything I do is going to have to make a lot of money and be very profitable, because, you know, I'm very competitive in sports, as David will tell you. And you know, we like, you know, and you want to win, and you need to be sustainable, and you need to have abundance. But that the primary purpose of the company will be to foster and develop new voices and creativity. Because if you look at human beings, just surviving, and it's nice to survive, and it's nice to, you know, have warmth and shelter and, you know, eat great food, but we really need more than that. I mean, why do you have very wealthy people that are unhappy? And part of it is, I think, that as a species, we've kind of forgotten that why we really exist is to create. And, you know, and creation can be in whatever form you want, but our media has turned itself into just another money-making machine. And media really needs to be more than that. Media needs to be the primary engine for encouraging human creativity of all kinds. So I think that a company that had that as its primary purpose, and that was not afraid to invest in deals and people and concepts that aren't guaranteed to be successful. When you go to the media companies right now, and I'm talking about the book companies, the film companies, the television companies, the only things they really want to finance are things that worked yesterday. There's very little risk-taking, and it's not the fault of the people there. It's the way everything's structured in Wall Street and the money, and, you know, if your quarterly profits fall, oh my gosh, you know, you all lose your jobs. So we need to create something that's a little different from that. So ultimately, that's sort of what my passion is, and one of the ways that we're sort of, the first project that I'm doing is sort of a, you know, sort of like, I guess, I don't know, I think it's Gandhi, be the change, or something like